first time Ranger tried to warn me, I thought he was dying. He was lying on the floor of a veterinary clinic outside Norfolk, Virginia, with blood on his harness and one broken tracking device hanging beneath his collar. The Navy chief who carried him inside said the dog had been found near an abandoned warehouse. No handler. No vehicle. No explanation. Then Ranger opened his eyes, looked straight at me, and pushed his nose against the silver nameplate on my uniform. Cole. He made a low sound in his throat. It was not fear. It was recognition. That was impossible. I had never seen him before. At least, that was what I believed. My name is Major Elena Cole. At the time, I was assigned to an Army Logistics Review team at Joint Base Langley, Eustis. My job was not glamorous. I inspected contracts, checked equipment records, and found the small mistakes that could become large disasters. I had spent 14 years learning that numbers rarely lied. People lied around them. That Tuesday afternoon, I had stopped at Harbor Point Animal Clinic to deliver medical files for retired working dogs. The clinic treated service animals through a charity called Guardian Home. My husband, Daniel Mercer, was the charity's founder and public face. Daniel was handsome, confident, and very good in front of cameras. He had served 8 years in the Navy before an injury ended his career. After that, he built Guardian Home from a small volunteer group into a national organization. He gave speeches about loyalty. He hugged veterans on television. He told donors that no military dog should ever be abandoned. People called him a hero. For 9 years, I called him my husband. Chief Nolan Price had arrived at the clinic less than a minute before I did. He was a broad, shouldered Navy dog handler in camouflage, with rain dripping from his cap. He carried Ranger as if the 80-pound Belgian Malinois weighed nothing. Found him behind Pier 19, Nolan said. He was inside a Guardian Home transport van. The receptionist froze. I felt something cold move through me. Guardian Home did not use Pier 19. At least, it was not supposed to. The veterinarian, Dr. Hannah Brooks, cut away part of Ranger's harness. His injuries looked frightening, but most were shallow. He had torn one paw and scraped his side, probably while forcing his way out of something sharp. He was exhausted and dehydrated. Someone had also injected him with a sedative. As Hannah examined him, Ranger kept watching me. "Do you know this dog?" Nolan asked. Ranger lifted his head at the sound of my voice. "He knows you," Nolan said. I moved closer. Ranger sniffed my hand, then pressed his nose against my wedding ring. Suddenly, he pulled away and barked once. The sound made every person in the clinic turn. Then he pawed at the broken device under his collar. Nolan removed it carefully. It looked like a standard GPS tracker, but the back had been opened and sealed again. Inside, beneath the battery, we found a tiny memory card wrapped in clear plastic. Hannah stared at it. "Dogs don't hide evidence." "No," Nolan said. "Handlers do." At that moment, my phone rang. It was Daniel. I stepped into the hallway and answered. "Where are you?" he asked. There was no hello, no warmth, just the question. "Still at work." I do not know why I lied. Maybe it was the tension in his voice. Maybe it was Ranger's reaction to my ring. Or maybe some part of me had been collecting doubts for years and had finally found a reason to listen to them. Daniel was silent for half a second. "Did anyone call you from Harbor Point?" he asked. My heart began to beat harder. Why would they? One of our transport vans was stolen. There may have been a dog inside. He already knew. The van had been found only 20 minutes earlier. Nolan had called base security, not Guardian Home. The clinic had not contacted anyone. Yet Daniel knew where I might be. "What dog?" I asked. "Ranger, retired patrol dog, unstable. Dangerous when frightened." Through the small window in the door, I saw Ranger resting his head in Hannah's lap, while she cleaned his paw. "If anyone finds him," Daniel continued, "they need to call me directly. Don't approach him, Elena." His voice softened then, becoming the familiar voice that had comforted donors, reporters, and me. "Promise me?" "I promise," I said. It was the first lie I ever told my husband. It would not be the last. When I returned to the treatment room, Nolan held up the memory card. "We should turn this over to investigators," he said. I agreed. But I also knew how quickly evidence could disappear when powerful people received an early warning. Daniel had friends on the base, in local government, and inside several veterans' organizations. He had built a reputation so clean that accusing him without proof would destroy me before anyone questioned him. I asked Nolan to make an exact digital copy first. He studied me for a long moment. "You think your husband is involved?" "I think my husband knew where this dog was before he should have known." Nolan inserted the card into an offline laptop in the clinic office. There were 6 files. 5 were corrupted. The last was an audio recording. We played it. At first, there was only wind, metal scraping, and a dog breathing. Then a man's voice spoke from somewhere close to the microphone. "Move the remaining crates tonight." Cole started asking about invoice 17B. I stopped breathing. It was Daniel's voice. Another man answered, but his words were unclear. Daniel spoke again. "If Ranger gets back to her, we're finished." The recording ended with a sharp command and the dog barking. No one in the room spoke. My husband had not been trying to rescue Ranger. He had been trying to silence him. Par TWO, Tichi Lefi Ike HUGHTI'd. I drove home that evening as if I were returning to a stranger's house. Daniel was in the kitchen, preparing dinner. He had opened a bottle of wine and placed 2 candles on the table. It was exactly the kind of thoughtful scene that once made me feel lucky. Now I noticed details I had ignored before. His phone was face down. His laptop was gone from the counter. A half-burned document rested in the fireplace, even though the August night was warm. He kissed my cheek. "Long day. Routine," I said. "No call from the clinic." Nubao. His shoulders relaxed. That small movement hurt more than a confession. During dinner, Daniel talked about a Guardian Home fundraiser in Washington. A senator would attend. 2 defense contractors had promised large donations. He wanted me beside him in uniform. "It helps people trust the mission," he said. I looked at the man I had loved for almost a decade and finally understood that my uniform was part of his decoration. My career gave him credibility. My name opened doors. My presence made his lies look honorable. "Of course," I said. "I wouldn't miss it." He smiled. I smiled back. That night, I lay beside him without sleeping. At 2 in the morning, his phone vibrated. He checked it, then went into the bathroom. Water ran in the sink while he made a quiet call. I could not hear every word, but I heard one name. Mason. Colonel Grant Mason was my commanding officer. The next morning, I began with invoice 17B. It appeared in a quarterly report for emergency veterinary equipment. Guardian Home had charged the government for 12 portable surgical units delivered to military dog programs. The receiving forms showed all 12 units had arrived. But one serial number belonged to a machine destroyed in a warehouse fire 3 years earlier. 2 others appeared in export records connected to a private security company in the Middle East. I had noticed the repeated numbers the week before and asked our accounting specialist to pull the original documents. She told me the records had been archived. Now the folder was gone. I checked the access log. Someone had deleted it at 60:14 that morning using Colonel Mason's credentials. At 800, Mason called me into his office. He was a polished man in his late 50s, with silver hair and the relaxed confidence of someone who had never been forced to explain himself. He closed the door and offered me coffee. "You've been working too hard, Elena," he said. "I like finishing what I start. That's one of your strengths. It can also become a weakness." He slid a folder across his desk. Inside was an order assigning me to a 6-month training post in Arizona. I had not requested it. "This begins Monday," he said, "4 days from now. A last-minute need. And my current audit transferred to someone else." There it was. The first official move against me. Mason leaned forward. "Take the assignment. Spend some time away from all this. Daniel tells me your marriage could use breathing room." I kept my expression still, but anger burned behind my eyes. My husband had discussed our marriage with my commanding officer. More importantly, he had prepared an excuse for removing me before I knew there was a reason to fight. "I'll review the order," I said. "It isn't a request." "Then I will follow it." He smiled, believing he had won. I left his office and went directly to Nolan. Ranger was recovering in a secured kennel at Harbor Point. When he saw me, he stood, limped forward, and placed one paw against the gate. Nolan had learned more about him. Ranger's official handler was Petty Officer, First Class Marcus Reed, who had retired 6 months earlier. Guardian Home claimed Marcus surrendered Ranger after developing health problems. But Marcus had vanished 3 weeks ago. His apartment was empty. His bank account had not been touched. His truck was still parked near Pier 19. "You think he's dead?" I asked. "I think somebody wants us to think he ran," Nolan said. He handed me a photograph recovered from Ranger's damaged tracker. It showed Marcus kneeling beside the dog. He was thin, tired, and holding that day's newspaper. On the back, written in black marker, were 6 words. "Ilama Kulakulo, Ama Kaudodago." I had met Marcus once, though I had not remembered his name. 8 months earlier, he approached me after a Guardian Home ceremony. He asked whether I personally reviewed the charity's military contracts. Before I could answer, Daniel stepped between us. He put an arm around Marcus and guided him away, laughing as though they were old friends. Later, Daniel told me Marcus was struggling emotionally and sometimes became confused. I believed him. That memory filled me with shame. Marcus had tried to warn me in a crowded room. My husband had silenced him with a smile, and I had helped by looking away. Nolan and I examined the remaining files from the memory card. A technician recovered fragments from a spreadsheet. It listed dog identification numbers, medication amounts, shipping dates, and payments routed through a company called Blue Tide Recovery. I recognized the name. Blue Tide was one of Guardian Home's subcontractors. Daniel said it transported retired service dogs to adoptive families. The spreadsheet suggested something very different. Several dogs listed as adopted had been shipped to private buyers. Some payments were much larger than any adoption fee. Beside Ranger's identification number were the words, "Countuni Uri Ova." My hands began to shake. These animals had served our country. They had walked ahead of soldiers into dangerous places. They had found explosives, protected handlers, and saved lives. Daniel had used their records to steal money, then sold some of them to anyone willing to pay. "We have enough to open an investigation," Nolan said. "Not enough to survive one." The spreadsheet was damaged. The audio could be challenged. Daniel would say the voice had been altered. Mason could bury the contract records. And Marcus, the one person who could explain everything, was missing. I looked at Ranger. He was staring at the clinic door. Then someone knocked 3 times. Hannah opened it and found a cardboard box on the ground. There was no delivery driver. Inside was Ranger's old leather leash and a folded note. The note was addressed to me. "Stio di G Injai, OR T next bus, Kain Aobox. Parich REE. Olo Tichidogi fear has a strange way of making the world clearer. Until that moment, part of me still hoped there was an explanation. Maybe Daniel had become trapped in someone else's crime. Maybe his voice on the recording meant something different. Maybe the man I loved still existed beneath the lies. The threat destroyed that hope. I did not want the man back anymore. I wanted the truth. Nolan contacted a federal investigator he trusted, Special Agent Priya Shah. She worked with the Department of Defense Inspector General and had a reputation for continuing cases after important people asked her to stop. Priya met us in the back room of a closed diner near the Chesapeake Bay. She listened to the recording, studied the spreadsheet fragments, and photographed the threat. "This is enough for preliminary action," she said. "But Major Cole is right. If Mason controls the internal records, he can warn everyone before we obtain warrants." "So what do we do?" I asked. "We find Marcus Reed. Priya told me to behave normally. I would accept the Arizona assignment, attend Daniel's fundraiser, and give him no reason to believe Ranger had reached me." It sounded simple. Pretending to love a man after learning what he was capable of was the hardest performance of my life. For 3 days, Daniel watched me closely. He asked whether I was angry about the transfer. He asked whether I had heard anything about the stolen van. He even suggested we take a vacation when I returned from Arizona. Every question was a trap wrapped in kindness. I answered carefully. Meanwhile, Nolan studied Ranger's behavior. Working dogs remember routines, scents, and locations. Marcus had trained Ranger to touch specific objects on command. When Nolan placed a map on the floor and named nearby locations, Ranger reacted to 2 words, Pier and church. There were 7 churches near Pier 19. Priya checked Marcus's phone records. The last number he called belonged to St. Michael's Veterans Outreach Center, a small church 2 miles from the warehouse. We went after dark. The building was empty, but Ranger pulled us around the side to an old storage shed. Beneath a stack of donated blankets, we found Marcus's duffel bag. It contained clothes, dog treats, a first aid kit, and a disposable phone. The phone held one unsent video. Marcus appeared on the screen with Ranger beside him. "Major Cole," he said. "If you're watching this, I failed to stop them alone." He explained that Guardian Home recruited him after retirement. At first, he transported dogs to legitimate families. Then he noticed animals disappearing from the system. Their records showed peaceful adoptions, but the vans drove to warehouses and private airfields. Marcus began copying documents. He discovered that Daniel and Mason were billing the government for equipment that did not exist. Blue Tide Recovery moved the money and the dogs. A private contractor named Victor Hale bought trained animals for illegal security operations overseas. Marcus tried to report it. The complaint went to Mason. 2 days later, Daniel told Marcus that Ranger had failed a behavioral test and would be euthanized. Marcus knew it was punishment. He stole Ranger back and ran. "I chose you because your name is on the inspections." Marcus continued. "Daniel says you sign whatever he puts in front of you. I don't believe that. But if I'm wrong, none of us have a chance." The video ended. I sat in the dark shed, hearing one sentence again and again. "Daniel says you sign whatever he puts in front of you." My signatures were on the quarterly reviews. I had trusted summaries prepared by Mason's office because the original receiving documents were always delayed. I had checked the math, but the starting numbers were false. Daniel had not only used my reputation, he had built his protection from my approval. If the scheme became public, I would look like his partner. That was his final insurance. If he fell, I would fall beside him. The disposable phone contained one more clue: a photograph of a red navigation buoy marked 42. In the distance was a low gray building with a damaged roof. Nolan recognized the shoreline. The building was an unused rescue station on the Elizabeth River. Priya requested surveillance, but the request was denied within an hour. The reason given was insufficient evidence. Someone above her had already been warned. We could not enter the station without authority. We could watch it from public land, so that was what we did. At midnight, a blue tide van arrived. Daniel stepped out. Even from a distance, I recognized the way he adjusted his jacket before entering a room. Colonel Mason arrived 10 minutes later in a government vehicle. The third man was Victor Hale. Priya recorded all three. Then Ranger began scratching at the floor of our van. "What's wrong?" I whispered. He moved to the rear door and whined. From inside the rescue station came a faint sound. 3 short knocks. A pause. Then 3 more. Nolan's face changed. That's a handler's recall pattern. A Marcus was alive. We called local emergency services and reported a person in distress. Priya identified herself and requested immediate assistance. Before officers arrived, smoke began rising from the rear of the building. Daniel and Mason rushed out through the front. Victor Hale drove away in the blue tide van. They were burning the evidence. Nolan opened our door. "Wait for the fire department," Priya ordered. Then the knocking came again, weaker this time. I thought of Marcus trusting me without knowing whether I deserved it. I thought of Ranger bleeding on the clinic floor. I thought of every signature Daniel had stolen from my good name. I followed Nolan. We stayed low and entered through a side door where the smoke was thinner. Ranger led us down a short hallway to a locked office. Nolan broke the weak frame with his shoulder. Marcus lay on the floor with his wrists tied. He was bruised and barely conscious, but alive. Ranger reached him first. The dog pressed his body against Marcus and made a sound I will never forget. It was not a bark or a cry. It was relief with no words large enough to hold it. We dragged Marcus outside moments before part of the roof collapsed. As paramedics treated him, Priya received a message from her supervisor. She had been removed from the investigation. Colonel Mason walked across the road toward us, his face lit by the fire behind him. "Major Cole," he said, loud enough for the officers to hear. "You are under investigation for theft, destruction of government property, and conspiracy to defraud the United States." Daniel stood beside him. He would not look at Ranger. He looked at me with tears in his eyes, playing the wounded husband perfectly. "Elena," he said, "what have you done? Part four. Tate trap. Duel farmini by sunrise, my face was on the news." The story said a respected army major had manipulated contracts to benefit her husband's charity. Anonymous sources claimed Daniel discovered the fraud and planned to report me. The fire at the rescue station was described as my attempt to destroy records. Daniel gave a statement outside our home. He said he loved me. He said I had been under terrible pressure. He asked the public not to judge me before all the facts were known. It was a brilliant performance. He did not accuse me directly. He did something more effective. He forgave me on camera. The army suspended me. My access was revoked. Investigators took my phone and searched my office. Financial records appeared showing payments from Blue Tide, recovery to an account in my name. I had never seen the account before. Mason had prepared everything. For one night, I believed they had won. I sat in Priya's car outside the hospital while Marcus underwent surgery. Rain struck the windshield. My career was collapsing. My marriage had been a weapon, and half the country seemed ready to hate me. "Tell me the truth," I said. "Can we prove any of this?" Priya looked exhausted, but not defeated. "They moved too fast," she said. "How does that help us? The fake account was opened 11 months ago. The false transfer orders were created last week. They expected your questions, but not Ranger's escape. Their plan was ready, but they had to activate it early. She handed me a copy of Daniel's television statement. He said he discovered suspicious payments 2 months ago. That means he claims he knew about a secret account before the documents framing you were created. It was a small mistake, but small mistakes were my specialty. Marcus woke the next afternoon. His testimony connected Daniel, Mason, and Hale, but the defense would attack him. He had accepted cash from Blue Tide while working for them. He had illegally copied records. Daniel's lawyers would call him a bitter former employee. We needed evidence the conspirators could not explain away. Ranger gave us the answer. Hannah brought him to the hospital courtyard so Marcus could see him. The moment Ranger heard Daniel's voice on a news clip, he began pawing at the thick chest panel of his tactical harness. We had already searched it once. This time, Nolan removed the entire inner lining. Stitched between 2 layers of fabric was a second storage card. Marcus smiled weakly from his wheelchair. I trained him to carry 2, he said. 1 for them to find. 1 for him to keep. The second card changed everything. It contained full shipping logs, photographs, bank transfers, and recordings of meetings. One video showed Daniel ordering an employee to alter adoption records. Another showed Mason approving false military receipts. A third showed Victor Hale discussing buyers and prices. But the most important file was a live backup key. Marcus had copied the evidence to an encrypted online archive. The key on Ranger's harness gave Priya access to documents Daniel believed had burned in the rescue station. We finally had the truth. Priya wanted immediate arrests. I asked her to wait 48 hours. Why? Because Victor Hale still has 6 dogs scheduled for transport. If we arrest Daniel now, Hale will disappear with them. And what are you proposing? I looked at the invitation to the Guardian Home fundraiser. We'll let Daniel believe I am ready to surrender. That evening, I called my husband. He answered on the first ring. Elena? His voice sounded gentle, concerned. If I had not heard the recordings, I might have believed it. I need your help, I said. He was quiet. Tell me where you are. I know how this looks. I know Mason has evidence against me. I can't fight both of you. No one wants to fight you. Then make me a deal. He did not speak for several seconds. I continued. I have Marcus's backup key. I will give it to you. In return, you clear my name and let me disappear. Daniel released a slow breath. Do you have the card? Less. Bring it to the fundraiser tomorrow night. Why there? Because no one will expect us to meet in public. That was not the real reason. Daniel wanted me beside him one last time. He wanted photographs of the accused wife returning to the loyal husband. He wanted to control the final picture. I agreed. The next night, the Guardian Home ballroom glittered with flags, gold lights, and enormous photographs of military dogs. Veterans filled the tables. Donners wore evening clothes. Television crews waited near the stage. I arrived in uniform. The room became silent. Daniel crossed the floor and embraced me. Cameras flashed around us. You made the right choice, he whispered. So did you, I answered. He led me to a private preparation room behind the stage. Colonel Mason was waiting inside. Victor Hale stood near the service door. I had expected Daniel and Mason. Seeing Hale confirmed that the dogs had not yet left the city. The card? Mason said. I held up a small black storage card. First, I want proof that the account in my name will be erased. Hale laughed. She still thinks she can negotiate. Daniel stepped closer. Give it to me, Elena. Tell me why. His eyes hardened. Because you owe me. I owe you. Guardian Home would have been nothing without your uniform. I built everything. I made us important. All you had to do was sign reports and stand beside me. And Marcus. Marcus became a problem. The dogs. Assets, Hale said. Expensive ones. Daniel raised a hand to silence him, but it was too late. You threatened to kill Ranger, I said. Daniel moved close enough that I could smell his cologne. He is a dog. I looked into my husband's face and felt the last piece of my grief disappear. No, I said. He is a witness. The door opened. Priya entered with federal agents and military investigators. Nolan followed with Ranger at his side. Daniel's face went white. Every word in the room had been transmitted through a microphone beneath my jacket. Hale reached for the service exit, but 2 agents blocked it. Mason began shouting about authority and procedure. Daniel said nothing. Ranger sat in front of him, calm and watchful. For the first time, my husband looked afraid of the creature he had dismissed as only a dog. Then Priya told us there was a problem. The transport truck carrying the 6 missing dogs had left its warehouse 10 minutes earlier. Echt, Loaltiwime Ians. Hale refused to say where the truck was going. Daniel demanded a lawyer. Mason claimed he knew nothing about any animals. We had evidence against them, but 6 dogs were still trapped inside a moving vehicle. Then I remembered invoice 17B. The false invoice included 12 portable surgical units. 2 serial numbers had appeared in export records. Each export record listed a private airfield near Suffolk, Virginia. Hale had used the same route for equipment and dogs. Priya alerted state police and airport security. Nolan, Ranger, and I traveled with the federal team. I was still suspended and had no operational authority, so I stayed inside the command vehicle and helped trace the paperwork. The truck reached the airfield 8 minutes before us. By then, police vehicles had blocked the main gate. The driver abandoned the truck and ran toward a drainage field. Officers arrested him without anyone being hurt. Inside the trailer, we found 6 frightened military dogs in separate cages. They were sedated, but alive. One of them wore a guardian home adoption ribbon around her neck. That detail broke something inside me. The ribbon was bright blue. I had tied ribbons like it during charity ceremonies. I had smiled for photographs while Daniel told families they were giving heroes a peaceful home. I knelt beside the cage and whispered, "I'm sorry." Ranger moved beside me and touched his nose to the door. The frightened dog stopped shaking. It took months for the full case to unfold. Victor Hale pleaded guilty after investigators connected his company to illegal overseas sales. Connell Mason was convicted of conspiracy, obstruction, fraud, and destruction of evidence. His decorations could not protect him from his own recorded voice. Daniel fought the longest. He hired famous attorneys. He blamed Hale. He blamed Mason. He blamed Marcus. Finally, he blamed me. According to Daniel, I had been a distant wife, an ambitious officer, and a jealous partner who wanted control of his charity. His lawyers displayed photographs of us at ceremonies and asked why I had smiled if I suspected him. When I testified, Daniel watched me with the same expression he used during our marriage whenever he wanted me to doubt myself. This time, it did not work. I explained the contracts one by one. I showed how the serial numbers repeated, how the receiving reports were altered, and how my electronic signature had been copied. Priya presented the creation dates, proving the account in my name was fake. Marcus described his kidnapping. Nolan explained how Ranger carried the evidence. Then the prosecutor played the recording from the fundraiser. He is a dog, Daniel had said. No, I had answered. He is a witness. The courtroom was silent. Daniel was convicted on every major charge. When the judge asked whether I wanted to make a statement before sentencing, I stood and faced the man who had shared my home, my name, and nearly a decade of my life. You believed loyalty was something you could display on a stage, I said. You wore veterans' sacrifice like a costume. You used my uniform as your shield and these dogs as merchandise. You thought love would make me easy to control. You were wrong. Love made me patient. Duty made me careful. The truth made me free. Daniel looked down. For years, I imagined revenge as a dramatic moment. I thought it would feel like fire. Instead, it felt like a locked door quietly opening. Justice did not return the stolen years. It did not erase the shame of knowing I had signed reports I should have questioned. It did not repair every frightened animal or every veteran Daniel deceived. But it stopped him from doing it again. That mattered more than watching him suffer. The Army investigation cleared me of wrongdoing. It also found that I had followed procedures that were too weak to detect deliberate fraud. I was offered reinstatement and a promotion track if I wanted it. I accepted reinstatement, but not the future they planned for me. Instead, I helped create a joint inspection program for military working dog contracts. Every transfer required independent verification. Every animal's location had to be confirmed. No single commander, charity, or contractor could control the entire record. I also testified before Congress about the weaknesses Daniel had exploited. Speaking publicly was painful, but silence had protected him for too long. Guardian Home was dissolved. Its remaining funds were transferred to a new nonprofit, led by veterinarians, handlers, and veterans. They called it the Reed Ranger Foundation. Marcus protested when he heard the name. Ranger did all the dangerous work, he said. I told him. He couldn't have done it without someone brave enough to trust him. Marcus recovered slowly. The fire had damaged his lungs, and the weeks of captivity left scars no camera could capture. Yet every morning, Ranger helped him walk a little farther. The other rescued dogs found homes with experienced handlers. The dog with the blue ribbon went to Hannah, the veterinarian who treated Ranger on the first day. She named her Liberty. As for me, I sold the house Daniel and I had shared. I kept almost nothing from it. One box held family photographs. Another held my uniforms. I stood in the empty living room on the final morning and expected to feel grief. What I felt was space. I moved into a small house near the water, where the air smelled like salt and the mornings were quiet. For the first time in years, every object in my home belonged to a life I had chosen. One Sunday, Marcus and Nolan visited with Ranger. We sat on the back porch while boats moved across the bay. Ranger rested at my feet. Marcus handed me the leather leash that had been left in the threatening box. I think he wants you to have this, he said. He is your dog. He is, but you're part of his team now. I ran my fingers over the worn leather. Near the handle, Marcus had carved 2 words. Fal Alu Thrh. That was his search command. Marcus explained. Whatever he found, he stayed with it until I released him. I laughed softly. Sounds familiar. A ranger opened one eye. For a while, none of us spoke. I thought about the day he came into the clinic bleeding and exhausted. I had believed I was looking at a wounded animal. In truth, I was looking at the last honest messenger in my life. Ranger could not explain the conspiracy. He could not testify in words. He could not understand contracts, stolen money, or public shame. But he understood loyalty. He knew Marcus had protected him. He knew Daniel was dangerous. And somehow, through training, memory, or instinct, he knew my name meant one final chance. I used to wonder why Marcus trusted me. When I finally asked him, his answer was simple. At that ceremony, everyone watched Daniel. He said, "You were the only person watching the dogs." I had forgotten that moment. Marcus had not. Maybe trust is built that way, not through speeches, but through the small things we notice when nobody expects them to matter. A year after the trial, The Reed Ranger Foundation opened a recovery center for retired working dogs. The building stood on the site of the old rescue station. The burned structure was gone. In its place were bright kennels, training fields, and a medical wing with windows facing the river. At the opening ceremony, reporters asked me to cut the ribbon. I refused. Marcus cut it with Ranger beside him. I stayed near the back, away from the cameras. I did not need another photograph proving I had been there. I had spent too many years beside a man who cared more about the picture than the truth. After the crowd left, I walked through the quiet building alone. On one wall hung the identification tags of the rescued dogs. Beneath them was a simple plaque, Loa Wildtys Note P-lined, Lo Uldy Urge THT Riger, found me there. He was older now. Gray hair had appeared around his muzzle, and his injured paw sometimes bothered him in cold weather. Still, he moved with the same purpose. He sat beside me and looked up. I touched the silver nameplate on my uniform. Cool. The same name he had touched in the clinic. You remembered? I whispered. His tail struck the floor once. I had entered that clinic believing my name belonged to my career, my marriage, and the reputation I had spent years protecting. Daniel tried to stain it. Mason tried to erase it. For a while, I feared they had succeeded. But a name is not saved by what people say about it. It is saved by what you do when the truth finally calls you. Ranger had carried that truth through darkness, pain, and fire. All I had done was follow him. And that became the revenge Daniel never expected. He tried to use my loyalty to bury me, but the dog he betrayed taught me where loyalty truly belonged. The end.